Hello, and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host, Rob. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the Warlock multi-classing tier list. So, we're almost done. We're at Warlock. We just got Wizard to go, and a few subclass videos, of course. But we're getting near the end. And as many of you know, Warlock is actually my favorite class in the game. And one of the reasons I love Warlock so much is because they multi-class so well. However, in order to be consistent with the other videos, we're really looking at being a majority Warlock in this video. And one of the things Warlocks do generally best is used as a dip. In other words, we're looking for 1, 2, maybe just a couple levels of Warlock, maybe 3 or 4, but usually just 1 or 2 levels. And then we're combining it with something else as our main class. When we're looking at Warlock as the main class, some of the combinations seem a little less intuitive. But that being said, there's still some really great choices, and we're going to go through them and talk about them in this video. So, as always, I will quickly explain the main 3 reasons I personally like to multi-class. And number 1 is to kind of like double up on my core idea or core proficiency of what I want to do, right? So we're going to take 2 classes that do something quite well, but do it differently, combine them both, and just get the best of both. And usually we want to just be really dominant in one particular area. That's usually the best reason to multi-class. Reason number 2 though is to cover for core weaknesses in our main class. So an example I always give would be, say, the wizard who starts with 1 level fighter, giving themselves better armor choices, giving themselves constitution saving throws, things of that nature, right? But in a case like this, it could be a warlock who maybe starts with a level or 2 of paladin, because this is going to give you heavy armor and could give you things like smites, while then allowing you to go majority warlock and really dig into, like, say, hexblade or something like that. And that works very well as well. Reason number 3, and the weakest reason, but still a good reason, is to gain more versatility. However, this is one thing I always point out, is that usually being dominant in one area is just better for the group than being pretty decent at a bunch of different things. And this is because you're not a solo player, you've got a party. And having somebody who's really good at dealing damage, and somebody else who's really good at, say, healing, and somebody else who's really good at, say, crowd control, is just going to be better for the party than having one guy who's trying to do all 3 of those roles at the same time. It's just generally not as good. But that being said, there's still nothing wrong with having more versatility for your party, having like a familiar to scout for you or things like that, having somebody who can do some, like, even if it's just basic ritual casting. These things can be a really nice addition to a party. But if your party already has a wizard who's not multi-classing and is just really going heavy on ritual spellcasting, you being able to add more wizard ritual spellcasting isn't much of a gain. So this is why I say that adding more versatility, while still really good, is usually a weaker reason than the first 2. So anyways, as with all the other videos, we're going to be ranking everything in our A, B, C, D, and E tiers, with the S tier at the very top, reigning supreme above them all. I tend to be quite stingy with S tier. I don't like to just, this is a really good build, so it's automatically an S. Usually those ones are in A, I feel. Like, I really want the S tier ones to really stand out and to be, the best of the best. I still think that A and B tier are both really excellent. I've played some B tiers, and I've had a ton of fun with them and been very effective. There's nothing wrong with those, I'm just saying that I personally like to kind of keep the best of the best for the S tier. So anyways, that gets us through all the preliminary stuff, and let's take a look at the actual classes themselves. So, as always, we're going to go in alphabetical order. So beginning with Artificer, we do have a few problems. Number 1, we're using intelligence for the Artificer and charisma for the Warlock. That's not necessarily great, but we can get some extra spells. We can get a bit more, flexibility in our bonus action, because every Artificer subclass has something to do with a bonus action. And especially if we wanted to go, like, sometimes as a Warlock, the fact that our spells automatically scale with our pack slots can actually be a really big weakness. You want to cast something like a shield spell, but suddenly you're forced to use a 5th or 4th level spell slot to deal it with. That's just not great. And so having some, even if it's just 1st or 2nd level spell slots from a different class that aren't automatically scaling, allows us to use some of those kind of spells at the appropriate level, so we're not wasting all of our good pact magic slots. The fact that every Artificer has something to do with a bonus action is great. The fact that we could imbue our own like magical items is also pretty good. I don't think Artificer is the strongest out there, but I don't think it's a bad choice either. I put it in the B, maybe kind of on the lower end of B, but still I think it's a pretty decent mix. If we're just wanting a couple levels of Artificer, there's usually something to be gained there. Or 3 levels, or 4, whatever, right? Overall, I don't think Artificer is a bad choice by any means. Next, we have the Barbarian. And I'm probably rather biased because I've actually played a Barbarian Warlock, and I absolutely loved this guy. He was a lot of fun, and he was really, really effective. The combination of Barbarian Rage plus spellcasting does not really seem very intuitive, but if we're only looking at a couple levels of Barbarian, maybe it's just for Rage and Reckless Attack, for example, which is all I took on my character, then we can combine it with a lot of spells that don't require concentration, like say Armor of Agathis, or potentially a Fire Shield at higher levels. And because the Barbarian is only taking half damage while raging, these like Thorns type of builds, you know, to steal the Diablo term, can be very, very effective. Far more effective than they are on most other characters, because we're getting hit a lot and dealing back some okay damage as well, right? But on the Barbarian, we're getting hit for half damage and dealing a lot of damage back, which is a much better combination. I really like the Barbarian with the Pact of the Fiend. I think that Hexblade doesn't offer anywhere near as much. Having Shield on the spell list doesn't really help us much if we're raging. Being able to attack with Charisma doesn't help us if we're trying to use Reckless Attack, because we specifically need to use Strength. But Fiend has an ability where every time we get a killing blow in combat, we get temporary hit points, and this just works really well with the Barbarian, who's, you know, raging and only taking half damage, allowing those temporary hit points to last twice as long. So I think there's some pretty nice combinations there. If you get to like level 5 Warlock, you can even grab Eldritch Smite as one of your invocations, and since you're attacking recklessly, you're doubling your crit chance, which is very nice. You can get extra attack from Warlock. There's quite a bit good there, but I do think that there are some inherent weaknesses as well. And overall, I give the Barbarian a B. I think it's kind of a high B. It's like a B plus type of range, you know. But I don't know that it's, you know, as good as some of the others we have. Still a lot of fun, though. I can say that. That class was a blast. Moving on to Bard. So dipping Bard is going to give us some skills. It's going to give us Jack of all trades. It can give us some Bard features, which are pretty good. Unfortunately, though, most of the Bard abilities don't really complement the like primary Warlock type of like playing styles, right? The spell stacking doesn't work, right? Our pact magic slots and our Bard slots are separate, so those Bard levels aren't really contributing to our overall spell casting abilities. It does give us some nice options, right? Overall, I feel like it's much better as a Bard who dips Warlock than a Warlock who dips Bard. I still think it's a B, and I think that a Hexblade combined with like 3 to 5 levels of Swords Bard is actually really good. I would actually say that's an A. The Swords Bard allows us to pick up some fighting styles, which normally we wouldn't have as a straight Hexblade. And, you know, there's some nice stuff there. Blade Flourishes especially can be a really big boost on this class. There's no real contradiction here because we're just using Charisma for everything. So I do feel like the Hexblade plus Swords Bard is probably an A, but the rest of the Bard, I'm going to put it in the B tier. Still pretty good, but, you know, there's better. So moving on to Cleric. Cleric, depending on what subclass we take, could give us heavy armor, which is nice. Some more spell versatility, which is nice. It does use Wisdom, though, which is unfortunate. And it has some of the same problems we mentioned under Bard, where the spell slots are not stacking. I mean, that's going to go for all our permanent casters. We don't need to keep rehashing that over and over again. like I said, there can be advantages where maybe we wanted to get a shield spell from Hexblade. You know, now we could cast that using our Cleric spell slots. And we could cast, say, heals from a Life Cleric, or like a Vampire Touch, for example, using our Warlock spell slots. You know, there's some alright stuff there. Overall, though, I feel like Cleric is a pretty medium type choice. I'm going to put it in the C tier. I was kind of borderline putting it up in B, but I just don't think it's quite good enough. The fact that it's like very mad, the fact that we could have gotten heavy armor from a bunch of different ones, and if we went Hexblade, then we could have had medium armor anyways. If we didn't, then the armor is suddenly starting to look a lot better. But even still, I don't know that there's so much here to draw me. I do think the idea of a Celestial Warlock with a Life Cleric and just doing a bunch more healing is kind of interesting. I just don't know that that's a good enough build, in my opinion. So, in the end, Cleric's going to end up in the C tier. That brings us on next to Druid. And unfortunately, I feel like Druid has a lot of the same drawbacks as Cleric, but it's probably actually slightly worse. I'm tempted to give it a C-, but I think I'm actually going to push it down into the D tier. The main thing from Druid is wild shaping, but if we're only dipping Druid, our wild shaping is basically going to be out of combat, so not a lot of use there. And if we went with, say, Pact to the Tome, we could have grabbed, like, Find Familiar, in which case we could have a Familiar doing the scouting, which would cover much of the same power that we'd gotten from our shape-changing. And of course, if we went Pact to the Chain, we're going to have an even better Familiar, like possibly an Invisible Imp, which really destroys anything else that we would have been getting from there. So I feel that there's just not a lot to be gained. Wild shaping is very nice. I'm not trying to complain about that. I just think that Warlock has other ways of kind of filling that niche. I do think that on a Druid who wanted to just dip Warlock and maybe grab the Armor of Shadows invocation and use that as a way of boosting their armor class, that could potentially be interesting, I think. But, you know, that's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at a Warlock who's just dipping Druid, and I feel like Druid just doesn't really offer enough. So, sorry Druid, you ended up in the D tier. Still better than Monk, though. Oh, sorry, that was a spoiler alert. Anyways, moving on to Fighter. Now, this is another one I've actually done a video on. I had an NPC in a campaign who joined the party briefly. It was like, the campaign lasted over a year, and this NPC was with the party for like a month while they were doing like, kind of her like, you know, side quest thing with her. And so I made her like the same levels as the PC so that she wouldn't like, you know, be a hindrance and a drag, but also wouldn't like dominate and overshadow the PCs. And I deliberately didn't optimize her for feat choices or anything like that. And I was surprised how incredibly effective she still was. So in this case, I feel like first level fighter, starting like as fighter level 1, used to kind of be the like Pact of the Swords or Pact of the Blade build before we had Hexblade. So back when all we had was like the Player's Handbook, for example, or the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. Fighter to get armor and con saves was kind of seen as the workaround for Hexblade's for Hexblade's not existing actually at that point, but for Warlocks just not having good armor choices. The idea was like, well, just start as Fighter 1 and then go Warlock. Get extra attack, maybe go back to Fighter for like Action Surge or even an archetype of some sort, you know. Battle Master works quite well, giving you some nice maneuvers and stuff to enhance your other fighting abilities. You know, you're getting a fighting style as well. Fighter is actually really, really great, especially on like a strength Warlock. Hexblades are still great with Fighter as well. That was the NPC that I played. She was actually a Hexblade. But I think that because Hexblades already get medium armor and shield, I think the other ones actually benefit even more, right? So Hexblade, you know, you go from like here to here. The other ones you're going from like here to here. So it's not that they're better. It's just that, you know, that equals that up and closes the gap, right? Overall, I think Fighter's actually an S. There's just so much good stuff that you can get from just a few levels of Fighter, added to a Warlock who can get, extra attack from Warlock. You can get, you can get smites, you can get whatever. You can also go to like Fighter 6 if you wanted, and just don't take Thirsting Blade, giving you an extra feat choice, for example, getting that feat at 4, another one at 6. It's very flexible. There's a lot of things you can do there. Action Surge on anybody with multiple attacks is already pretty good. Yeah, there's just a lot of great stuff there. Moving on to Monk. Dipping Monk is going to make you mad. It's going to cost us any armor we might have had. Honestly, there's very little reason to go Monk. I have seen some theory crafting with Kensai Archer builds using Hexblade as well, and then just, using a bow. And at least the numbers that this person provided looked pretty decent, but I kind of feel like you could have done the same thing with a Fighter Battlemaster, and you would have probably been better off, because you would have had Action Surge. Overall, Monk, especially Dipping Monk, is very rarely going to be good. You're not going to have a lot of key points. You're giving up so many other things on top of that. So, I don't know. In the end, I just figured I'd be consistent and put Monk in the E tier. Sorry, Monk. There are some good combinations with Monk. It's just Warlock just does not really seem to be one of them. Anyways, moving on to Paladin. So I've already covered like Paladin Warlock, where we looked at like taking a bunch of Paladin levels. So really here we're looking at dipping Paladin. We're going to be looking at like say 2 to 4 levels at most. If we're getting 5 and 6, then that's going to fall into more of the Paladin type builds, in my opinion. So if we're only looking at like say 2 levels of Paladin, for example, and then going most of the way Warlock, this is still going to give us heavy armor proficiency if we want it. It's going to give us a fighting style. It's going to give us smites. And of course, say we went with Hexblade, for example, we could be using those Paladin spell slots to cast our shield spells and things like that, while just smiting with our high-level Paladin or Warlock spell slots that are all coming back on a short rest. This is actually pretty effective. You can also use things like a two-handed weapon in these type of builds, because the limitation on the Hexblade is that you can only use the one-handed melee weapons with your charisma unless you get Pact of the Blade, which is a 3-level investment. And if you're going, just 1 level just so you can use charisma, then that's just never going to apply. But if we're taking a bunch of Warlock levels, we could be using a polearm with this build. We could be using a greatsword or whatever, right? We could even be using like ranged weapons, although that does kind of counter the idea of using the Paladin smites. I think that's probably better left to other ones like say Fighter, where we could get that archery fighting style. But just saying that is an option. And we've also got the option of grabbing Eldritch Smite and stacking with Divine Smite, especially if we get a crit. Like, double smite crits are frighteningly effective. So overall, I think there's a lot of good stuff here. It's probably not going to be a huge surprise that I actually think this is another S tier build. I actually put it slightly ahead of the Fighter one even. I think that Fighter, as we start getting to higher and higher levels, maybe starts to look a little better, but the Paladin one's just really good pretty much right from the get-go, and it's hard to go wrong, actually. And like I said, once we've got that extra attack, we can even go back into Paladin again, grab a subclass, maybe grab an extra ability score increase if we want that Paladin 4, and it's really solid. So anyways, moving on next to Ranger. The Ranger isn't a terrible idea. It's not great. We do get another fighting style. That's okay. Unfortunately, a lot of the things we might want are things like, say, Hunter's Mark, but it's pretty redundant when we already have Hex. Things like the archery fighting style. I mean, we could have gotten it from Fighter, The summons, not bad, but Warlock already has pretty good summons. If we really want to concentrate on something, we could be doing it with higher level Warlock spell slots. I don't think the Ranger really offers us as much as a lot of the other martials. But that being said, it's still not a terrible choice. I put Ranger in the C class. It's, better than some of the other options, but not as good as others, right? So next we have Rogue. So dipping Rogue is going to give us skill, it's going to give us expertise, it's going to give us cutting action, and of course sneak attack. Things like Devil's Sight is really great on a Rogue, even if we're not trying to use the Darkness Devil's Sight combo. Just the fact that we can see in any sort of darkness, including magical darkness, is great if we're trying to be like sneaky and scouting at things, and maybe the DM throws something at us that we weren't expecting. Well, oh, it's magical darkness, no one can see. Like, oh, I can. It's pretty good stuff. Overall, I think Rogue is pretty strong. I'm going to put it in the B tier. I think it's maybe slightly on the weaker side of B compared to some of the others, but still really solid. Could definitely be worse choices out there than going Rogue. So next we have Sorcerer. Again, this is another case, kind of like the Bard, where I think it's better the other way around. I think you're better with a lot more Sorcerer and just maybe dipping Warlock. And this is mostly because meta magic and sorcery points are better with lots of sorcery points. The more the better, And if we only have 3 or 4 levels of Sorcerer, or 5 levels of Sorcerer maybe, then, we're not having that many sorcery points. That said, though, there are still some really nice things about this combination. For one thing, it means we have higher level Warlock spell slots that are all recharging on a short rest that we could be converting into sorcery points. So if we're about to take a short rest, we realize we haven't used one of our Warlock spell slots yet, maybe it's a 3rd or 4th or 5th level, whatever, we can convert it to sorcery points, take our rest, get those spell slots back again, and now we just got a bunch of extra sorcery points, right? So nothing wrong with that. If we wanted to just be like a mostly Eldritch Blast, Agonizing Blast, Hex guy, being able to quicken cast some Eldritch Blast and basically double our damage for a round or two, there's nothing wrong with that. Getting more invocations so we can maybe like push people or pull people, with those repelling blasts or grasps of Vidar. It's all pretty good. In the end, I'm going to give it an A. I still think it's very strong. I just think that it's usually stronger in reverse. And in general, like, Sorcerer is one of these classes where, you can never have too many sorcery points. You just can't. So, the more Sorcerer levels you have, generally, if you're playing a Sorcerer, the better off you're going to feel. So finally, we have the Wizard. Again, Wizard has some really great abilities. They've got some nice subclass features. They've got a great spell list. We can get some ritual casting from Wizard. But anything that was really going to boost our power, Sorcerer just would have done better. And at the end of the day, I was going to put Wizard in the C tier, because I do think that there's still some good stuff. But the truth is, I just think it's overshadowed by Sorcerer to such a degree that it's really hard to recommend it. I'm going to put it down in D along with Druid. I think it's better than Druid still, probably, in combination with, with the Warlock, just because of ritual spell casting. But if we went back to the tome, we could have had all those rituals anyways, and rituals from any other class. So I feel like even one of the main things that we can often get by dipping Wizard could be redundant depending on the choices we're trying to make here, right? So in the end, Wizard just doesn't have, as much to offer as it usually does. So D tier it is. Anyways, that's going to bring us to our final rankings. So in the S tier, we actually have 2. We have the Paladin and the Fighter. In the A tier, we have the Sorcerer. In the B tier, we have the Barbarian, the Bard, the Rogue, and the Artificer. In the C tier, Cleric and Ranger. In the D tier, we have the Monk and the Druid. The Wizard and the Druid. And in the E tier, of course, we have the Monk. Sorry, Monk. You do have some combinations you're good with, but generally the casters are not it. Oh well. Anyways, that is everything for this video. We're probably going to be taking a look at a couple of Wizard subclasses right away. Somebody requested I do the Archfey, and I think I haven't actually covered Archfey. I was looking through my video playlist. And I'm like, he must have already gone through it and seen that I didn't have a video for it. But I'm like, okay, like that's an actual decent wizard subclass. We'll probably also take a look at, I don't know, one of the others. I've got a couple in mind, but we'll try to avoid Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, especially since, which was there? Was that Pact of the Unliving, and then we got the, no, that was the Undead. Now we got the Unliving, I think, which is just kind of the same, but better in almost every way. So we'll probably look at that one instead. But anyways, after that, of course, once we've done a couple subclass videos, we're going to move on to Wizard, and, you know, then we're going to be able to finally wrap this series up, which has been going on forever, so I apologize. I know some people, this hasn't really been their thing. They don't really care about the tier rankings. But, you know, once I started on this path, it's like, I might as well just keep on going and finish them all off, you know? So anyways, thank you for watching. That's everything I have for this video. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section. I promise I read every single comment, even if I don't always respond. One of my favorite things about having a YouTube channel is being able to, like, interact with people in the comment section to see, you know, I love when somebody poses a question and then one of the other subscribers like answers it and it starts this huge discussion. I love that kind of stuff, you know, it's just kind of fun and neat. So anyways, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.